A woman in her 70s lives alone in a flat in Manchester. Her mother died in the house she was born in, surrounded by 4 generations of family. Her grandmother never lived more than 3 miles from where she was raised. Her great-grandmother's world was a village, a set of people who knew each other's names, debts, children, and feuds. The woman in Manchester has a pension. She has a GP, a social worker, a meal delivery service, and a streaming subscription. She has not spoken to a neighbor in 11 days. The village is gone. The state and the market stepped into the space it left. And the question is not whether those replacements are worse. It is whether they can do the same work. For most of human history, the family and the local community were not simply places where people slept and ate. They were the entire social infrastructure. The village raised children. When a mother died, the community absorbed her children into other households, not as charity but as obligation, woven into the reciprocal fabric of village life. The village cared for the sick. The village resolved disputes without courts. The village managed the shared land, the shared water, the shared granary. The household was also the unit of work. In a pre-industrial economy, there was no gap between domestic life and economic life. The farm, the workshop, the loom, these were in or adjacent to the home. The family worked together. Skills passed from parent to child by proximity, not by institution. This was not a golden age. The village was also a site of coercion. Women's labor and movement were controlled by men. Younger children inherited what older children left. Ethnic, religious, and class hierarchies ran through villages as sharply as through any court. The village could expel, shame, and destroy individuals who violated its norms. But it performed a specific kind of work. It tied people into a mesh of mutual obligation dense enough to catch them when they fell. The industrial state and the market would spend 2 centuries dismantling that mesh and replacing it, function by function, with institutions. The transfer did not happen all at once, and it was not experienced as loss at every stage. It happened because the industrial city made the old structure impossible. When a family moved from a village to a mill town, the extended network stayed behind. The new neighborhood was strangers. There was no shared granary. There were no village elders. There was no communal land. There was a factory, a landlord, and a market stall. The state stepped in where the community had retreated. In 1870, Britain introduced compulsory elementary education. The state would now raise the literate portion of the next generation, a function that had previously been handled by family, church, and local guild. In 1911, Lloyd George's National Insurance Act introduced sickness and unemployment benefits. In 1948, the National Health Service began. By the late 20th century, a person in Britain who fell ill did so within a network of state institutions rather than family obligations. The same was true if they lost a job, became old, or raised a child. This is not a British story only. Across industrial democracies, the same transfer happened on a similar timeline. The specifics varied. The American model relied more heavily on market mechanisms than the European welfare state, but the direction was consistent everywhere. The family remained, but it shrank. The extended family, the clan, the 3-generation household, the network of cousins and in-laws as economic partners, contracted into the nuclear family. Then the nuclear family itself became optional. Single-person households are now the most common household type in several high-income countries. The market did not simply absorb economic functions. It absorbed emotional ones. Therapy replaced the village elder. Dating apps replaced the matchmaker. Delivery services replaced the neighbor who brought food when someone was ill. Life insurance replaced the community's obligation to support a widow. The loneliness that results when these market substitutes fail to replicate the texture of genuine mutual obligation is now a measurable public health problem, correlated with outcomes as serious as chronic illness and reduced life expectancy. The state and market between them took the village apart and handed each person a set of individual entitlements and consumer choices. Whether those things add up to a community is the question they have never quite answered. The human need for belonging did not disappear because the village did. 2 new imagined communities rose to meet it. The first was the nation. A nation is a community whose members will never meet most of each other. In a village, belonging is earned through shared experience, proximity, and mutual debt. In a nation, it is constructed through shared narrative. There is a common history and a common language. There is a flag, a national anthem, and a calendar of memorial days. The nation is not simply a lie. It organizes genuine emotion. People die for nations. They sacrifice for strangers wearing the same national identity. They feel grief when a national sports team loses. The nation creates the feeling of community at a scale that genuine community cannot achieve. But it cannot do what a community does. It cannot bring food when you are sick. It cannot absorb your children if you die. It cannot resolve the dispute with your neighbor on Tuesday morning. The second imagined community was the consumer tribe. Brands and fandoms organize people into groups that feel like communities. So do political identities, dietary choices, and aesthetic movements. They provide shared language and shared symbols. They also provide social sorting. They tell you who is like you and who is not. They were also deliberately engineered by market forces to extract loyalty and spending. This is the uncomfortable structure of modern belonging. The communities that feel most real and most chosen are often the ones most precisely designed to make you feel that way. The emotional work of community has become one of the things the market sells. Against all of this internal turbulence, one fact about the modern world is genuinely strange. The last 80 years represent the longest period without direct armed conflict between major powers in recorded history. This needs to be stated carefully because the 20th century also contains the two most destructive wars ever fought. The decades between 1914 and 1945 killed somewhere between 70 and 85 million people. The industrial state and industrial capital turned out to be extraordinarily effective instruments of mass violence when directed toward it. But after 1945, something changed. The United States and the Soviet Union, each capable of ending human civilization within an afternoon, spent 45 years not doing so. Since 1989, no war between two recognized states with significant military forces has produced casualties on a scale comparable to the conflicts of the early 20th century. The UPSULA Conflict Data Program, which tracks armed conflict with consistent methodology, shows the rate of deaths in interstate war declining sharply from the mid-20th century onward. Several explanations are offered, and none is complete on its own. Nuclear deterrence raised the cost of great power war to a level that made victory meaningless. A war that ends in mutual annihilation is not a war that any rational actor can expect to win. Economic interdependence made conquest less rational. When a country's prosperity depends on trading with its neighbors rather than extracting resources from them by force, the incentive structure of war changes. Conquering a country that supplies your components disrupts your own supply chain. The changed nature of wealth mattered too. The most valuable assets in a modern information economy are not fields, mines, or ports. They are legal systems, human capital, and institutional trust. These do not transfer well through conquest. Occupying a country destroys the institutional fabric that made it economically useful. This argument must be held with honesty. The Russia-Ukraine war beginning in 2022 is a direct challenge to any simple version of the long peace. Interstate war has not ended. The deterrent structures that held for decades are not permanent features of the landscape. The peace is real as a trend and fragile as a guarantee. Here is what the permanent revolution produced. A person born in a wealthy country today has a longer life and more physical comfort than almost any human who lived before them. They also have more legal protection and a lower statistical chance of dying in interstate war. They also have a higher statistical chance of living alone, of eating alone, of having no close friend to call in a genuine emergency, of belonging to communities that were professionally designed to feel like belonging. The village-imposed obligation. The modern world offers freedom. Those are not the same thing and they do not produce the same life. The forces that built the long peace between states are global markets, interconnected institutions, and individual mobility. Those same forces dissolved the social fabric inside states. External stability came with internal permanent revolution as its price. The state can provide a pension. The market can provide a therapist. The nation can provide an anthem. None of them can provide a neighbor who knows your name and will miss you when you are gone. The next question, the question that follows from all of this, is not political or structural. It is biological and psychological. Did any of it make us happier?